Test how close I am. Okay, that's fine. 10 years ago, if they would have told me that I would be presenting a talk in the Batcave, I would have never believed them. But here I am with a list of quotes for you. This is a different kind of talk than I'm used to doing. I'm used to talking about the work that I do, which is web related. I'm not going to talk about that today, so if you came to hear something about responsive design, I'm very sorry. We're going to talk about something that comes up in my work, and probably in all of your work, over and over again, since the time when I did art direction for print design, up until today, up until this talk today, actually. It's about getting uncomfortable. And before we do that, I want to talk about this guy, right here. That guy is Nick Wallenda. Anyone know Nick Wallenda? Yeah, personally? Nick Wallenda is a high wire artist. He walks across wires between two very high things. Buildings, Niagara Falls, and in this case, a gorge outside of the Grand Canyon. So there he is without any kind of safety harness. He's just on that wire. The wire's about 5 centimeters wide. This thing took him about 23 minutes to walk across with high winds, winds changed, and he's got this really, really long pole, and other than that, just a bunch of space beneath him, 460 meters to be exact, which is higher than the Empire State Building. So if he falls, he's got a very serious problem. So if you see this and we think about bravery, what would you say? Would you say this is brave? I say it's crazy. It's like fat shit crazy. But it's not really, not for him. So we'll come back to that. So what is bravery? If you look it up, it says courageous behavior. But what's courageous? So this doesn't help. It's like saying a pizza is a round thing with things on it. So you don't really get a definition of what bravery is. And since this is a theme all across the world, 60 different talks about bravery, I'm sure someone somewhere has done this quote from A Game of Thrones. Can a man still be brave if he's afraid? That's the only time a man can be afraid. And regardless, it says man because, you know, that's the way it was written. So it's gender neutral. But that's true. It's only brave if you're somehow afraid. You don't have to be really afraid, but if you're not, it's not very brave. So this is you and me, just everybody here. And what we do is when we learn something, we get good at it, we develop our skills, and then we get this kind of comfort zone around us. We all know that. That's usually in our daily lives, this is where we are, in the comfort zone. And you do your thing, but you really want to be in the uncomfortable zone. This is the place where a lot of creative things happen. So that's where we want to be. And then we have the abyss, which is like way out there. So let's say I were to say, you know what, I'm going to walk across the Grand Canyon on a 5 centimeter cable. That would be me jumping into the abyss. That's not what I mean when I say we have to get out of our comfort zone. That's just plain stupid, okay? So there's this fine line between being brave and being an idiot, and we don't want to cross that line. So what we want is to get out of the comfort zone into the uncomfortable zone, but something always holds us back, okay? And most of the time, we do that ourselves. And we do that in several different ways. So I can only tell you the ways that I hold myself back, but I have this sneaking suspicion that a lot of you have the same kind of problems that I have when trying to get out of your comfort zone. So one of them is fear and indecision, which I think we all have to deal with sometimes. And of course, another one is perfectionism. Not all of us have to deal with it, but some of us do, and it's not a good thing. I'll come back to that later on. And then all of us have our own bag of tricks. So we have to trick ourselves into not using our bag of tricks. So I want to talk about these things today, and we don't have much time, so that's great. I can keep it short. Fear and indecision. I'm wondering if anyone would like to share just a small thing, an example of fear. And I'm looking over here at a couple of people I know, putting them on the spot.
No.
No? Never afraid. Never afraid. Okay.
I'm afraid of telling you something right now.
Okay. There you go. There you go. That's a good one. That's good. Perfectionism. A lot of people have the wrong idea about perfectionism. It doesn't mean that you do perfect work. So people are sometimes proud of the fact that you're a perfectionist. That's really nothing to be proud of. Perfectionists don't do great work usually. They're so afraid of not doing perfect work that they actually sabotage their own work. So I see some people like smiling and nodding their heads. This is what I have. So I'm kind of a perfectionist, but nothing I do is perfect. Because what I end up doing is putting things off until the last minute because I'm like, well, I gotta wait until the perfect moment to start. And I have to make sure everything around me is perfect. It's gotta be perfect, so I don't want to start it yet because I'm not sure if the thing I just thought of is the perfect thing. So that's bad. Perfectionism is really bad, and it keeps you from doing things. It makes you deliver your work late. It makes you deliver your work kind of half-assed because you just don't have enough time to finish it because you've been putting it off so much. So there's this great book by Dr. Neil Fiore called The Now Habit, which talks about procrastination and how we put things off and how it's usually related to things like perfectionism. And then lastly, the bag of tricks, which is a thing. When I was in college, I did some theater, and my acting coach noticed when we had these little patterns. Like, some people, an example was this one woman who came in and she was being chased by someone in this play. And she came in and she goes, they are after him, which is not really good acting at all. But that was kind of her bag of tricks. She thought, well, if I'm out of breath, that means someone was chasing me, right? So you get these little symbolic patterns that you start to use, things that you're good at. Oh, I'm really good at playing with a certain typeface. So you're always going to use that typeface just because you're good at it. So you don't venture out and try new things. Okay? So what we want to do is get over to here. And why? Why do we want to be in the comfortable zone? The uncomfortable zone. Because this is where creativity happens. If you're always doing things in the trusted way, in the way that you usually do them, nothing new is going to come of that. So no creativity comes. You don't have to go way out of your comfort zone, but just slightly. And if you don't, it's going to be kind of the same thing you've always done, but dressed up in a different way. So the same ideas with different clothes on, basically. You learn when you get out of your comfort zone. Your comfort zone is just everything you know right now. So if you stay there, you learn nothing new. Okay? And this is nothing new. I think everyone here kind of knows these things, but the trip you've always wanted to take, the job you've always wanted to have, the raise you've always wanted to ask for, they're not going to happen as long as you don't put some momentum and make yourself uncomfortable to try to get those things. Okay? So it's also very exciting when you're outside of your comfort zone. It's kind of nerve-wracking as well. So I try to put myself out of my comfort zone probably a little too often, which is also not a good thing, so it can give you some stress. As long as you don't go too far and go into the abyss, then you're okay. So an example for me was this book that I wrote, Responsive Design Workflow. I gave a talk about this workflow that I've been using for the past several years, which is kind of controversial for designers in that I'm asking designers to use web technology as a tool to help design when when they're usually used to using things like Photoshop. Not a lot of designers are on board with that idea, by the way. But I gave this whole talk, and the publisher came up to me afterward, and he said, "Oh, I want you to write a book, and it should be about this." Bless you. And this was my reaction. Oh my God, a book. No, I'm not going to do it. So literally, I just said no right to his face the minute he came up to me. This is like one of the bigger technology, one of the top 2 technology publishers for web things, and I just said no right to his face right then without thinking about it, which is probably not a good idea, when someone offers you a book deal. So he said, "Well, why not?" And I said, "Well, I've never written a book before." Well, there's always got to be a first time, okay? And people might not like the book. Yeah, not everybody likes every book. That's okay. And I don't have time. I don't have time to write a book. Well, you've never tried, so you've never had to make time. These are just excuses, and we do this all the time. Whenever you want to try something new, so I don't have time. I've got to get this done. The client wants it by tomorrow, so I'm just going to pull out my bag of tricks. You can't do that if you want to try something new. So if I wouldn't step out of my comfort zone, I would have never written a book. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done to write a book, and I write quite a bit. But writing a book is not writing a blog post or an article. It's just a totally different thing. It's not even a thick book. When I look at it, when I'm done, I'm like, that's it? I spent all this time writing this book. And then of course it's fun to walk around and be like, yeah, I wrote a book. I'll sign it for you if you want. So get uncomfortable, right? Get out of the comfort zone. And how do we do that? That depends on you. I can only tell you how I do it. These little tricks that I started picking up when I was an art director, because these tricks are kind of the same tricks that you need when you're doing creative work, and you have to be creative on demand within a very short amount of time. So let's deal with them one by one. Dealing with fear, first of all. The first thing I know is that when you're faced with a decision and you're kind of afraid to make it, just make a decision. Stop being a baby and just say, I'm going to do it or I'm not going to do it. Okay? And what helps to do that is, do you really want to do it? If you don't really want to do it, you're going to have these problems like every day, that you'll be lazy about it. You have to really want to do it. And if you're not sure, just say no. Just don't do it. Say no, like I did to the publisher. Just say no. No is not usually a definitive no. You can say no and then change your mind later, sometimes. It's probably not a good idea when you're like getting married at that moment to say no and then hope to go back. But sometimes when you say no, I used to do this with my employees when I had my own company. I'd just say, well, don't do that idea at all. And they'd be like, oh, well, that's kind of drastic, don't you think, to just not do it at all? So there's some doubt in there. So maybe there's a yes in there somewhere. So no does not always mean no in this case. If you say no to an idea, it might get you thinking, well, actually, I kind of want to do that. So the opposite of that works as well. Just say yes. Yes is like the fastest way to become uncomfortable that you can imagine. Would you like to speak at Creative Mornings? Yes. I'll do that. Never given that kind of talk before in the Bat Cave. Structure. One thing that I find helps me when dealing with fear, like the nervousness that happens when you're giving a talk, for example, about a subject that you're not an expert on, but just out of your own experience, just to organize your thoughts a bit. Now, I always do this with like mind maps or outlines. And mind maps, there are people who give these the kind of new age mind map, express your inner self kind of mentors and stuff out there. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about you have just a bunch of crap in your head and it needs to get some kind of shape. Right now it's shapeless and you have to give it shape. So I do that. This is probably the third outline that I made to get an idea of what I wanted to talk about today, the first time I started putting these things down, it was just like every thought that was in my head, I just put it down, put it down, put it down. And then don't worry about what order it should be in or what things you might want to take out later. Just put everything down. So it's like brainstorming in a way. But then start rearranging things and give your ideas structure. When you do that, it kind of takes the fear away because you're focused on just structuring your thoughts. It's not, you don't have time really at that moment to be afraid of what it is you're doing. Okay, so another thing to deal with fear is think about the worst thing that can happen and then come up with this plan to make sure that thing doesn't happen. So the worst thing that could happen for me today was that I would be stuck in traffic or taking the train, which we all know how that goes, right? From Leeuwarden, which is, really far away. So I would have been late, wouldn't have been able to show up at all, something like that. So I thought, well, how can I take away that problem? Just go the night before, stay in a hotel, have dinner with a friend, and then you're there the next morning. I won't tell you the story about what happened this morning, but I'll tell you later. Another thing you can do is only compare yourself to yourself. The problem with this fear that we have about trying something new, especially creative work, is that we're always comparing ourselves to other people. When I wrote a book, I'm looking at a lot of my friends who've written like 3, 4, 5 books. I know one person who's written like almost 30 books. And all of them are like bestsellers. And my book, I think my mom read it and like 3 other people. And so I'm comparing that. I'm looking at the Amazon reviews and I'm like, oh my God, someone gave it like a 3 and 3 stars. And they said it was just kind of a fluffy, average book that doesn't really say a whole lot. And then I'm just crushed, the whole day. My whole day is ruined with stuff like that. But don't compare yourself to other people. Compare yourself to yourself. So when I do that, I'm like, hey, how does this compare to my previous book? Oh, I didn't have a previous book, so it's that much better. And the next book, that's the problem. The next book has to be better than this book. So I'm putting off writing the next book, obviously, because I'm a perfectionist. So, and the other thing you should remember is this. And I don't know who did this. This is a quote for you, by the way. I don't know who made this quote, but half the things you worry about will never happen. The other half will happen anyway. So why worry? Right? That when you think about it logically, which you can do at the moments that you worry, it seems logical in any case. So it at least confuses you enough to get your mind off the fear for a minute. Okay, so gotta hurry up here. Perfectionism. Very, very, very bad thing. The first thing to think about perfectionism is just let it go, because it's never going to be perfect. You are not perfect. You call yourself a perfectionist, but you're not there. You never will be there, and the thing you're making will never be perfect. It will only be good or good enough, but it will never be perfect. So get over it and just do it. That's the first thing to think about. Another thing is Vilfredo Pareto, the 80-20 principle guy, an economist, said that 80% of your results come from 20% of your effort. So it makes no sense to be perfectionist about all these little details that probably don't even matter at all. So it's a good idea to just think about when you leave here today, you go to work, if you do 10 things at work, 2 of the things you do will be responsible for 80% of the value of what you did today. And if you think about it, it's not always 2 and 10 or 80-20. Sometimes it's 70-30 or 90-10. But there's this uneven distribution between effort and results. You have to focus on the things that really matter and that make a difference in your work. And it seems kind of obvious, but we spend so much time, oftentimes, spending a lot of effort on things that in the end don't even matter at all. I had an employee who was making a design, and he spent a lot of time making buttons. And buttons, if you have that little shadow around it, that's fine. Why are you spending like a day on a button, when the whole design could be done in general? So focus on the things that matter. Working in bits. Sometimes if you have too long to work on something, you'll start getting into perfectionist mode. And if you stop, if you do like management guru Peter Drucker advised, use 90-minute chunks. If you can break things into 90-minute chunks, it gives you enough time to concentrate on something and really focus. But it doesn't give you enough time to start going off on these weird perfectionist tangents, usually. So that's a good way to deal with that. And this idea that perfectionists have that what I'm doing is not good enough, ask yourself the question, compared to what? If you're saying it's not good enough, then you're comparing it to something. What are you comparing it to? And usually we say that it's not good enough, but we don't have the idea of what we're comparing it to. And you should always compare that to previous work or things that you've done for yourself, and not on other people. Now, we have the bag of tricks, which is one of the hardest things to overcome to get out of the comfort zone, because you have these things that work really well. You're good at certain things, and you just repeat those because you're good at it, so you kind of know the outcome already. One of the things that helps me is to look outside of your own field, the field that you're working in, to get a different perspective on what it is you're doing. So with the book, the whole responsive design workflow was basically looking at different fields. I was looking at how programmers thought and how they worked. And a lot of those same principles could be applied to design as well, without making design a systematic thing. The approach of trying to make things easier and being kind of lazy in a way, in a real efficient way, that really helped me to develop that workflow. So you might be a photographer who looks outside of their field, or an architect who looks at photography, or a painter who looks to music. And these are kind of normal things that people do, but look to a field that's totally different, that you wouldn't expect. So try to surprise yourself and turn things upside down. So who knows the oblique strategies here? No one? Okay. Wow, that's cool. So the oblique strategies is a deck of cards, and I think they have like 4 decks now, developed by Brian Eno, the musician, and Peter Schmidt, his friend, artist friend. They developed this deck of cards, and they put these instructions, these quick sayings on these cards to get out of blocks that they have, creative blocks. So it could be like turn it around, or for these slides, I actually looked at one of the cards in Oblique Strategies, and the card I had was listen to the quiet voice. So that kind of influenced the style that I used for the design of these things, to do it kind of minimal. Just because I had no idea what I should try. So the oblique strategies, you could get I think they have like iPhone and Android apps for these things, but the cards are hard to come by and they're quite expensive, I think. So when I was in college, I painted. I'm actually a painter and a graphic designer. So I was doing a painting, quite a large one. I painted large paintings. And my professor came in, and I had asked him to take a look and critique what I was doing so far. And he was an eccentric guy, and he came in, and he stood like at about this distance from me to you, and he was looking at it, and he had that kind of, you know what dogs do, that kind of look like this. He's looking at it, and he didn't say anything. And then he walked up, unscrewed the easel, took the painting, turned it around, he screwed it back, and then looked at it again, and then he just walked out. That was it. It's really happened. And I know he's trying to tell me something. I'm not exactly sure to this day exactly what he was trying to tell me, but at first, knowing me, if you know me, I took it as an insult. I was like, oh my God, the painting looks better upside down. But it's not that. He wanted me to look at it and keep working on it, but just flip things around on their head, literally. So that's a good thing to try. Just try crazy things. Okay? Use a different tool. especially like designers on the web using Photoshop. Come on, try something else. You know, you don't have to give up your tool. Try something else in addition. You know, you learned Photoshop, you learned paints, you learned whatever you use, but try something else. It will give you different results. Okay, there's been painters who have, Julian Schnabel, broke pottery and basically glued it to pieces of board and then painted on top of that to make the surface harder to paint on, basically, in the beginning. And he came up with these really interesting objects when it was done. And he wouldn't have had that if he would have stayed in the comfort zone of just painting on a canvas. Hold on. Yeah, do it again. Turn things upside down again. That snuck in there twice. That's not a good thing. So, we want to get to here. Okay, think about that when you go back to work today. How can I get to here? And then the last thing I want to leave with you before I leave is one of my favorite professors in college. When I called her many years later, and I asked her, "Can you give some advice to me as a former artist who's trying to stay creative in their work?" And she said, "Stop making excuses and just go make art." So with that, I'll leave you to your day. Have a nice one.